Hello, hello. How's everybody doing on this cold Sunday? As you can see, I have my jacket on. We're just waiting for Abdul. Oh, speak of him. Hey, Stefan.
Hey,
Yo.
hello.
Can you hear me, Abdul? Can you hear me? You're like
I
super
can.
laggy.
Oh, really? Hold on for a second.
Hey, Nadisha. We're
So how
starting off
about
the day
now?
with technical difficulties. Can you hear me now?
I can
Yes.
hear
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, you can hear. Yeah, I can hear you as well now. But you're like super laggy though.
you. Okay, how about now?
Nadisha stated. Um, a little bit. Oh, I think it's okay now. Speak.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, all good,
Ah,
all good.
okay,
I can hear you.
perfect.
Yes.
Cool.
Abdul, thanks for making the time, man. How's your day been?
I'm great, man. I'm great. And also, by the way, I go by Halik. My middle name is my going. That's my That's the name I go by. So yeah, call me Halik. But yeah, it's been good. Woke up in the morning. There's a little shop opposite our apartment. So me and my housemate went and got some groceries, and then we made some food, some French toast, and some pineapple sauce thing, and made some potatoes like a thing. And yeah, it's been good so far. It's been a good day. How was yours?
Dude, French toast sounds so good right now. Okay, man. I got up a bit late because I couldn't
mm.
sleep that well. Got up a bit late and then I ordered some Sri Lankan food for a difference. I was just like craving it, so I ordered some Sri Lankan food, had some Sri Lankan food, and now it's cold as hell because Melbourne's going into winter now, so I got my
Oh
jacket
yeah.
because I sit in the balcony and do these things.
Mm.
But yeah, man. But dude, other than that, let's get started. Thank you so much for coming on board and doing this with me. Yasin is a mutual friend of ours, so he messaged me and he's
Yeah.
like, "You need to get Halik on board. You're literally one of the OG photographers of Sri Lanka. You've been doing this for a very long time." And also on top of that, what Yasin tells me is you've been taking photographs for NGOs, social enterprises, nonprofits for a very long time, and
Yeah.
apparently you're not a fan of the corporate field. So tell us all about yourself and how do you come to be and why do you hate corporate so much?
Oh, well, I don't know if I would say I hate corporates, but well, I guess I come to that later. But I suppose like just to get it out of the way, I mean, I think just politically I'm a bit more left leaning, so I suppose so I am much more critical of like capitalist practices and by extension corporate practices. So I feel like corporations are also very difficult places to work for sometimes because of the regimented environments that you have to participate in, and the way it kind of like puts you into this frame of having to work in a certain way, right? And I feel like we're talking about mental health and all these things. And for me, the way our lives are constructed in today's world is very kind of like connected to how our minds are reacting to it, no? And I feel like a lot of the anxiety and depression that we suffer in today's context is directly related to the way we work and also the way we are sort of trained to think about success and trained to think about growth, and I feel like corporations at a very individual level are a big part of that. I feel that with this virus crisis right now, one big advantage is that people have somehow exited capitalism as it usually functions. Yeah, and then there's a a place of rest and a place of like thought, and there's like potential there for some sort of liberatory process to happen for people to begin to process how they live their lives in a sense, and try to sort of begin to understand what are the stressors that on a daily basis contribute to the mental stress that we kind of simply, I think, by dint of not having the time or the space to process it, overwhelms us so much. And so to come back to corporations, this is sort of like my thing with them is a big gripe with the way we are sort of like, um, the way we have to kind of like live in today's environment, which I feel in many cases borders on almost inhuman, in terms of how we sort of like prioritize this idea of work and making money and growing and success above and beyond everything else. So yeah, that's sort of like where the whole corporation thing ties into. And of course, personally, I've been lucky enough not to have to work for a corporation for a long time. I did, of course, work for two really big corporations in the beginning of my career, and then sort of made the decision to kind of like switch, and haven't really looked back since. I've been really lucky to be like a freelancer for a long time. Um, yeah, so the photography thing really was just a sort of like an extension of my work as a journalist, maybe as a youth activist, where I was just taking pictures of the things that I was interested in, and then writing about it, putting it up on Instagram, and yeah, so just trying to sort of like look at images as sort of like these visual metaphors, no? So you look at the world and you see something, and there's like a funny connection between a cloud and a building, maybe just as an example. And for you, then it hits your head in a certain way in which you start thinking of something else entirely. And that thing, which is like a very normal thing, suddenly means something entirely different. So the symbol kind of changes. So for me, it was just a way of recording these things that I saw. Yeah, and then in 2015, I just became Insta famous for a while. And then I had a show at the Saskia Fernando Gallery, did a solo show there, and they still kind of represent my work. And then since then, I've been really lucky to work with a lot of like art institutions, locally and abroad, who felt that, hey, my work is interesting enough to show. So I'm like, hey, as long as people think my work is interesting to show and like exhibit and stuff, I'm gonna keep doing this.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. And
Mm.
I think that's brilliant, man. That the fact that you have a passion and you've really stuck through it and you really pursued it. And I think just on that fact of InstaFamous, like InstaFamous 2015 versus InstaFamous 2018 are two different, way different things. You know what I mean? Like it's a complete
Mm.
different dynamic. But
Mm.
touching on the corporate scene for just a second, man. So
Mm.
obviously, I have worked for three different corporates as well. And like it's been good and bad experiences. I've had good managers and bad managers, and it's
Mm.
a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that I realized, I didn't obviously understand about my mental health when I was working in those corporates. I started to
Mm.
identify my mental health late 2018 and throughout
Right.
2019. And this was after I moved to Australia. Because there was much more of an inclusive conversation, people were actually talking about it, there was help out there to go and receive. The corporate sector still is a very they still haven't adapted to that thinking process of, okay, mental health is actually a physical and emotional thing that people have to look at and also consider, because right now sickness is only considered as a biological thing, but actually mental health is very much connected to your physical and biological attributes. So why aren't corporates taking that into account in Sri Lanka? Is it that they're afraid that people are going to use mental health as an excuse to like get out of work or be less productive? Is that the
Mm.
biggest fear that they have, or what do you think it is?
Um, well, I don't know. For example, take so I have a friend in Norway, right? A good friend in Norway, and I I've been talking to her about how things work there, for example, and there you have a system where, say, if you're suffering from depression, you can actually take time off work, and your company will pay you your salary until you're fine, or you can go take a vacation. Um, and there is like a recognition of a human being as a human being, not just as a machine that produces labor to feed a corporation, which then produces profits, right? But that I think is also very directly connected to how maybe the political system in a country like Norway is run, which is a very sort of like a welfare-oriented state, right? So you have high taxes for people who pay money, people who earn money, but because of that, there's also like a huge amount of like social benefits for the people who sort of live and work in that country. And this means you have much shorter work weeks, you have much larger vacation time, you have paternal leave and maternal leave, you have all these structured kind of like things in that space that make your quality of life much better, right? So one thing I've been realizing during this whole crisis is that we as people have much more time to spend with friends. You know, there's like time to have a game of chess with your friend every afternoon, for example, or like cook together or something like that. And how many of us have this time to do on a daily basis when we work? You know, how many of us have like 4 or 5 hours to just chill at home and connect with our families? Because either we have work and we're working from home, or working in our offices, or we are anxious about work. We are thinking about work. We're thinking about the next promotion that we need to get, or how secure our job is. We're always worried about work because work puts us into this like state of anxiety, right? Because our jobs aren't secure, right? There's always something going on. So I feel like those are the sort of like a broader sort of reasons why workplaces become so difficult to work in, right? And I feel like if corporations have to genuinely recognize mental health as a thing, then they need to really start sort of like structurally changing things and sacrificing profit and profit margins. So I work for a company here called Frontier Research, for example, right? So there's like plenty of, I think there's a spectrum of places. So one place that I was like working at one point, Frontier Research had this policy of unlimited leave, for example, which was you obviously might have to take a pay cut, but if you want to suddenly travel for 2 months, you could do it. There was no fixed working hours, and there was like flexibility in everything. So they had like a system where the work culture was sort of prioritized over a systematized sort of like a profit-based motive. And that was primarily because of the founder had this specific kind of like goal in mind when he started the place. But I don't really think there's a lot of other places like that in Sri Lanka, nor in many other parts of the world, even in countries like the US, which you would think are far more sophisticated, right? But they have like very, very, very oppressive kind of like systems in place, especially, yeah. So I feel like there's a difference in how things happen in different parts of the world, but they're all very tied to very structural reasons and not just about an understanding of mental health. It's just the refusal to acknowledge that there are ways and means in which you can mitigate mental health problems, but this would involve like very large sacrifices in the long term that no one is really sort of willing to do, right? So everything else becomes, I feel, very tokenistic to sort of like do ventures that might work in the short term but don't really have any long term impact. Feel kind of tokenistic, and I don't really know how much they do other than just providing like a release, like a temporary release for sort of like mental anguish and trauma, but don't really provide any sort of structural kind of like long-term foundations for, I don't know. That's just my opinion, but
Yeah, man. And I think on top of that, when it comes to hits in profits, obviously people take a step back and be like, oh, maybe not,
yeah,
especially in a Sri Lankan context, it's a very, very small market, and people don't really want to give any leverage. And I think the more I think about it, it's just like firms or people who go abroad and start their own thing in Sri Lanka. Like, for example, I was having a chat with Sajani yesterday, the founder of Colombo Cooperative. She was the first person who opened a co-working space. And when she opened it, people were not aware of co-working spaces, or they weren't like aware of like what it meant in Sri Lanka. So like as soon as she opened it, obviously people were confused, but now co-working spaces are just like a normal thing that you talk about. So I feel like to start doing it, there has to be a firm that's already in existence that basically changes their structural processes to accommodate these things. Or there's a new firm that comes in and says mental health is an important issue and we tackle it like this.
yeah,
But also it has to be vetted in a way where Sri Lankans don't misuse it. because
Mm.
like, when we want leave, we will try and do whatever we can to like get a few days
Yeah,
off,
no, that's
but
true.
like,
Yeah.
it should be done in a way where things can be assessed properly, where they get like the proper like certificates or passes from therapists or certified counselors, or like ODoc does B2B. So if like ODoc partners up with that corporation and gives the okay for them to approve that leave, like
Mm.
there can be stuff like that done. So like I feel like if there's a front runner who does it first, then people will be like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, they're doing
Mm.
it now, they're getting good publicity for it, let's hop on the same bandwagon kind of thing.
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
think like if we do have a front runner like that, I think it could change the narrative just a bit. But
Yeah.
look, everything is like up in the air, right? It could keep
Yeah.
happen and just like people will be like, no, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that for a second, man. So
Yeah.
like when it comes to when you move from corporates to freelance, right? When you were working, when your work was recognized and you could see that you could make this like a living and you could do this because you love doing it, were there any moments that you had any doubt? Were there any moments that you were completely afraid and you were like, no, this is a very risky thing to do? Because a lot of Sri Lankans, or a lot of people around the world, the biggest thing is you have that steady flow of income, right? And as soon as you give up that steady flow of income, it's a big risk, right?
Yeah.
So, like, did you have any of those moments where you were just like, no, maybe this is not a good idea?
Yeah. Well, moments of like crippling fear and anxiety and self-doubt, I have them about once a week, maybe. Yeah. So I don't, yeah, of course. I feel like being a freelancer is a really tough thing to do, especially today. And the only reason that I feel like I've managed to do it was because in the beginning I knew what I didn't want to do. The only thing I knew that I didn't want to do is I didn't want to work like a 9 to 5 job. I didn't want to be in like a systematized, structured environment. And I wanted to also be able to do whatever I felt like doing. I felt like a lot of the ways in which disciplines are structured today, or ways of subjects are structured, it's very difficult to be very creative in those spaces or to bring in like new things and experiment and stuff like that. So I wanted to be able to experiment and do those things. And to be honest with you, really, I don't really make a living out of like photography or art as such yet. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to make a gradually increasing amount of money with it over the years, but it's never really been enough to make a living out of. So I also do a lot of other work which I've always been doing, like writing, some consulting, and so on and so forth. But they're always like short gigs and like different sort of like things like that. So I think, at least from my sort of experience, getting into the freelancing is very ad hoc. It's not really something that is structured, predictable, unless maybe for someone else who has a very specific career and goal that they're doing. So say they are working as a designer and they're working for a design company, then they might just branch out into like an independent practice, like an architect or whatever, or a freelance journalist who is very, very certain about what they're doing, and there's like a space for it and a client base for it. But for me, it was a very open kind of space because I have experience in finance, I have experience in marketing, journalism, and the development sector. So I have like a mixed bag of different experiences. So I found that I've been like juggling most of these little things in different ways. But yeah, suffering from crippling anxiety every so often, it's just very difficult because you're always thinking about, oh my God, what will I be doing 10 years down the line? Will I still have the skills to be able to do what I'm doing? Have I just been lucky for the last few years? Is the crunch coming? There's always this fear of the future that cripples you. And I feel like that's something that I've been trying to teach myself to live with is the uncertainty. Because one thing is that I feel like working in corporations and systems, they give you an illusion of uncertainty. There's like, there is definitely a certainty that is provided, a structure that is provided, but oftentimes, like for example, in a crisis situation like this, you could find all those certainties just vanishing, disappearing. They're all contingent on a lot of things being right and being constant. And so I feel like in a spaces like that, there is this sort of like sensation that you are kind of safe, but how really safe are you? And from my experiences in working in these spaces, that's also one thing that happened to me, is that I realized that they weren't really as safe as they sort of like project themselves to be. So one thing I've been trying to sort of live with or learn to live with is to find like comfort in being uncertain about things, being, feeling at home in uncertainty as such. Because one thing that's always self-assuring is that no matter how much we have anxiety about the future, all we have to do is really think about ourselves as we are today and look back on all the terrible times we experienced in the past and realize that they're still alive, they're doing fine, and we've got everything we need and we're happy, right? So there's really no reason to doubt that the future is going to be any different, I feel, I mean, it would be super ungrateful to do that, I feel.
Yeah, man, I and
Mm.
I and I and I agree with you, and I think I have 2 points to add to that. So earlier today, I was in a call with one of my closest friends, and we were talking about how life is pretty much not certain. Like nothing is certain. Like we should live life with no expectations and live life where you think, where you know everything is not certain. And when you have that acceptance in your head, it's like a
Yeah,
switch that basically says, okay, you're okay. Like nothing is certain.
yeah,
Just focus on you and just take it day by day. Yes, have a plan for the future, but you also have to acknowledge that that plan could crumble.
yeah.
It could, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. One door closes, another one opens.
Mm.
And the other thing that I was going to say, I completely forgot. So let's come back to that when I remember it.
So, mm.
But I just like the more I think about, oh yeah, so gratitude. So like sometimes when people message me and they're just like, oh, I am having a bad day. Like I get so many messages almost every day, man. Like I have so many messages to reply to, which I feel so bad, but I have to do it soon. But like about people who are just like, oh, I'm just trying so hard, but I can't see the light. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
make a list of what you're grateful for. And they're
mm.
just like, oh, like nothing's coming to my head. And I was just like,
Yeah,
I'll tell you the easiest one. You're breathing
yeah,
right now. You're
true.
alive.
Yeah,
Like some people forget that like life is so not certain. You could get
yeah,
hit by a bus, right? A worse virus could come around and wipe half of humanity off of this world. I'm not trying to be
yeah,
morbid. I'm just
yeah,
trying to say like there's so many things that could be wrong right now, but you're alive.
yeah,
You know, you're alive and
yeah,
you're breathing, and that's a positive in itself.
for
So
sure.
I think it all
Mm.
comes down to perspective and switching that switch on, saying,
Yeah,
okay, I'm alive. I'm
yeah,
alive. On top of that, I know that nothing is certain. Let's do the best for myself.
yeah.
So how I want to segue into passion, right? In
Mm-hmm.
Sri Lanka, passion is quite the risk,
Mm.
especially with how the job markets are, how corporates hire. It's just so family member orientated sometimes as well. The promotions you get are uh, very subject to favorism depending on where you work. So there's so many
Mm.
things that could go on, right? It sometimes it's not based on hard work. So this demotivates people a lot, and it especially demotivates people who have left behind their passion to pursue a career that their parents have asked them to do, or they pursued it because of money.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you how important it is for someone to try and balance out their passion as much as they can. Like, there's so many people who are still struggling with money, right? They can't take that risk. So how important is it to you to like at least hold on to that passion even though they're working a 9 to 5?
That's a tough question, man. I mean, I feel like, okay, so this you're working a 9 to 5. I see. So I actually really started venturing into this space, honestly, by blogging, right? So I would like write a blog. This was back in 2008. And I was working for a corporation at the time. And I discovered blogging and I just realized that, hey, I'm having all these thoughts about the world. I'm reading the news. I'm forming all these opinions about things that are going on in the world and I need to start putting them out, you know. And I was like, and more and more in the news at the time, there were blogs being quoted and stuff like that. And this was about 12 years ago when blogs were actually a thing, right? And then I discovered kottu.org, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to start a blog. And then I started two blogs. One was just for my sort of mental output, like really bad poetry and prose and all that stuff. And another one was where I would like, make opinions about the economy or all these like half-baked thoughts in my head, right? But that's so I kept doing that for about a year when I was working in a corporation, and I didn't really have a plan that I really wanted to kind of like make this into something. I was just like really passionate about the world out there, and I just really wanted to say it. I mean, I don't necessarily think your passion needs to be connected to making money. Really, it's just about wanting to do something and you just find a way to do it. That's all you have to do. And then I feel like I really believe that it opens doors for you, because what happened was I continued working in this place, and my blog sort of like started getting followers. And then eventually a friend of mine joined a newspaper, and he started like this online sort of space in this newspaper, and he published some blogs from Kottu in the newspaper. So he was the Sunday leader, and it was Indy who runs Yamu. Basically, he joined the Sunday leader. He also quit a corporate job to join the Sunday leader, and he was running Kottu. And he was like, okay, every week in the Sunday leader, I'm going to start publishing some interesting blogs, right? So he started publishing blogs, and my one was among them. And it's like the first time I'd written something that was actually published in a paper. And after a while, Indy was like, do you want to join the Sunday leader? Because there are no journalists in the paper anymore, because this was 2010. And that was 1 year after Lasanta had been killed. And the paper was like in a bad state. And I was able to just say, okay, hey, you know what? I'll join the paper. Because also in my corporation at that time, there was like a major downsizing. So our salaries got cut by half or something like that. So I really wasn't earning much more as a journalist than I was. So my salary was like suddenly halved. It was actually about 60% reduced. So I was like, it was at a level of a journalist salary anyway. And I was just starting to study a master's course. I was like, hey, you know what? This is the perfect opportunity. I'm just going to be a journalist for a while, do my master's, and then do something else after that. So I think you have passion, and then you persevere and you do. There's action, right? You have passion and action, then you just have to wait for the opportunity to come, you know, the stars to align and the corridors to fall in place. And I don't know, that's how my sort of like thing has always worked, is that it's always been like, looking back, it's always been all these like interesting little chances and like happenstances that have like kept making things happen. But one thing I always did was I've just like, you know, if I'm interested in something, you just do it, because you don't really need much to be able to do it, you know. I feel. But I don't know what your thoughts on that. Because I feel like sometimes people work really hard. Like sometimes people might work 18, 20 hours a day, and then that's a little unfair to tell them to be able to still do that then, right? So I feel.
Yeah, dude, I think, for example, there's some really interesting things happening right now with social media, right? I think stars aligned is, yes, the terminology is, people will be like, what do you mean stars aligned? But technically, look at what's happening right now, right? So many musicians are building a social presence because of what's going on right now, right? Where their content was dying, or not dying, but very less engagement before. Now that people are home, where there's time to listen to this music and you need that like relaxation, all of those things, musicians are really starting to pop, you know? And I think you've seen this guy called Kapila. He's this guy who...
Oh, yeah, sure. It's so funny.
Okay, so he has blown up, right? He has grown like by like 13,000 followers in like the past couple of months. These 3 weeks, he like blew up much faster than anyone else, right? Yeah. Because people need that comedic relief, and he's not stupid, man. He's a smart individual. Yeah. He's very, very smart. Very smart. And people don't realize.
I met him actually. I just realized that I met him once a long time ago.
Right. So he's a very smart individual. He knows exactly what he's doing, right? But he's capitalizing out of the situation. So everyone has a passion that they have, but like in these moments, yes, it's a very bad moment, but the stars have aligned for artists and creatives and comedians, and even online platforms like newspapers, all of those platforms really capitalize on this moment and really harp on this opportunity so they can carry it forward, right? So what I think when it comes to balancing out passion, and if you really can't like not quit your corporate job, I would say work your job, but hold on to your passion, even if it's 2 or 3 hours a day, or even if it's an hour day of work, hold on to it, because when the moment of opportunity arises, it's either talking to the right person or posting that right thing that goes viral, or talking about a topic that's very controversial, but it blows up. All of those things, if you do it and it blows up, then your opportunity will arise. That'll lead, then there'll be like a sort of like a domino effect, right? After the domino effect happens, it's about, okay, then it's up to you. Is this going to be a short-term domino effect, or am I going to make this a long-term domino effect? Short-term is you capitalize on the current situations and you go about it. Long-term is you double down on your work and push it even further, right? So then control is in your hands.
Mm.
So I really think like even this live thing, man, I started it and now every Tom, Dick and Harry is doing the live sessions, right?
Right,
And like
right.
it's a good thing because they've
Yeah.
realized that people, if you got zero viewers to like before all this Corona thing, now you're getting 12 viewers, now you're getting
Yeah.
20 viewers, now you're getting
Mm.
100 viewers, right?
Yeah.
It's just capitalizing out of the situation. But the thing is, for me, if you have a passion, it has to be done with the right intentions, right? Um, I never started this thing to like grow a following or anything like that. I just want to have engaging conversations. If I even had 10 followers today, I would still be running this show.
Right.
Obviously, I
Yeah.
will get a lot more no's than I do now. But
Sure.
the thing is, I realized that in this moment, people are spending so much time on social media. Why not do this? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's my thought of it, man. I think
But,
you should always hold on to your passion. Don't let it die because you let a part of your happiness die. That's what I believe.
sure. But
And I
what I
think
wanted to
if
ask you
you
was like, how do you
go ahead,
like
man.
find the energy, bro? Like, how do you find the energy? You're talking to people, like five people every day, and asking them questions and being
Man,
engaged. Like,
I am burning out. I am burning
yeah.
out, dude. I am tired all the time. I am tired all the freaking time. So, because the thing is, it's not that I'm putting the numbers up and not having engaging conversations. I'm having 30 to 45-minute conversations with every single person, which are engaging and cover certain topics that are pivotal in this day and
Mm,
age, right?
mm,
It's not stupid conversations. Yes, we have a bit of fun here and there, but it's
mm,
also always interlinked to a conversation. So,
mm.
right now, dude, my brain is fried. So after today, I'm taking a 2 days off,
Right,
and I'm gonna like try and make this a thrice a week segment until this dies out, and then once a week after that.
right.
So it is frying me right now. My university is being affected, and even my part-time job. My boss is very empathetic, luckily, so he's taken some work off of my shoulders. And
Um,
the biggest thing for me is, dude, I have panic attacks that I don't necessarily plan. I mean, you don't plan a panic attack anyway.
yeah.
So I
Mm,
I associate home with relaxation and sleep.
right,
But also, where I've had some of my panic attacks are in the shower and in my room,
right.
right?
Wow.
So that
Yeah.
emotional attachment to those environments are there. So
Mm,
when I work, dude, I'm in a cafe or I'm in university. That's where I work. I stay out of
right.
house at home as much as I possibly can. So for me, the biggest, hardest part is staying at home.
Mm,
So the live shows were actually made to help me first. And
yeah.
then by helping me, I help another person,
Mm,
right? That's how
mm,
I started it. So it is helping. So like these 6 hours of talking to people, these 6 hours of my day that are getting me through every single day, to be very honest.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, man. So like working from home has been a mess. To answer your question, yes, it is tiring. I need to like balance it out a bit more. But yeah, man, it's been I've learned so much though of talking to
Mm,
people like you, learning about more about your thoughts, and it's honestly instilled more hope in me because there's
mm.
actually a lot of interesting individuals in Sri Lanka, man. There's actually a lot of interesting individuals in Sri Lanka that are
Yeah, I've
working
been
very
like
hard
looking
to change
at
their
your
life.
list of people and being like, wow, who are these people? Have I never really sort of like known of their existence before? And they're such like diverse individuals, and
Dude,
that's really
what
cool. I
I'm
mean,
gonna do
how did
after
you find these people? Like
So
everyone?
recommendations one, people have heard of another, and just like sometimes when I'm just searching through social media, I come across a profile and I do a bit of research and be like, yeah, this person might be interesting to talk to because
Nice.
even if it's a model, I delve into the toxicity in the model industry. I talk about like skin color, racism, all of those things as well,
Mm,
right? If it's an actor, I talk about like how hard it was, like passion, all of those things, like all the hard hitting topics behind every single person. Even I got Danu, Danu,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
even I got him, man. He talked about how he was bullied. He was like, he's when he like bullied for having man boobs, and he was one
Right.
day he was pinched so hard that he was bleeding,
Oh,
right? So like people like him have gone through so many things, and they're coming on these shows and talking about these things that they wouldn't get the opportunity to talk about, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I've spoken to. The thing is, man, I don't judge on like number of following or I've had my followers on here as well, and we've had like interesting conversations as well. You know, like the biggest thing in Sri Lanka for me is, dude, people don't get the opportunity to talk. Only
Mm-hmm.
people with social stature or the right connections, they're the only people
Mm,
who get, like, or they look a certain way. They're the only
right.
people who get to talk, you know?
Mm,
Like, recently I got messages from people saying, oh, this organization is having a mental health panel and they've had like professionals, but there's no mental health advocate. They should get you in. But they won't. I know they won't.
mm,
You know, they won't
mm,
reach out to people like me. So, like, for me, dude, I want to use my platform more and more to highlight people who wouldn't necessarily get the opportunity to speak, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like that brings me joy as well because like it's even if it's like right now we have like 14 people watching, but that's 14 whole lives,
Yeah.
right? That's the perspective that we look at. 14
Mm.
whole people that are spending 45 minutes with us watching this conversation. You know,
Yeah.
I don't care about the numbers. I care about 14 people like enjoying this
Mm.
conversation and getting through the day for
Mm.
45 minutes.
Yeah.
That's what I care
Yeah.
about.
Thank you, people, for watching us. I'm just like really flattered.
Ramble on.
Yeah.
But
No, but
yeah, man, that's
that's
about me.
really
Sorry.
good, man.
I go off on
Yeah.
tangents when
No,
people ask
that's
me
great.
questions. But
Yeah, I was just like wondering
um,
about that. Like you have just been like pouring yourself into this over the last few days, and it's been great. But I was like thinking, if it was me doing this, I would not really have the energy to keep going like this.
yeah.
But yeah, so I was just like curious about
Yeah,
that.
no, no. I'm taking a break, man. After this Thursday, I'll be scheduling it better. I'll be
Right.
scheduling it better. Just to
That's
look
good.
after my mental health as well. But yeah, man,
Mm.
just to ask two more questions before I let you go. One is, what do you think about the photography scene now, man? We see so many young guns coming in, getting new gear and doing
Right.
all kinds of edits and making pictures look like they're freaking awesome.
Yeah.
But like I've seen your work as well. Yours is very rustic. It's very you show there's like a story to it in a
Mm.
sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about photography today?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I would actually even call myself a photographer. For a long time in the beginning, I didn't really have a label for what I did. It was just like me taking random photos from my phone and putting them up on online spaces. I started being called a photographer after I had my first exhibition, and then I started doing photography work, right? But then I started like experimenting more and more and more, and then suddenly walked into this area of being or doing art. So calling what I do visual art as opposed to sort of photography. So I think there's like a distinction there, and I feel like I'm more comfortable by being calling myself a visual artist, I suppose, because that doesn't really imply being tied to a particular discipline or a way of kind of doing things. So I think photography is associated a lot with a particular type of imagery, depending on whether you're a commercial photographer or some sort of other photographer, like a photojournalist or something like that. So I feel like it really depends on what sort of area you're working in, Um, I feel like in commercial photography, there are lots of like, there's a lot of basic, very sort of like tried and tested trends that people still seem to be sort of like making money out of. But they're also like very interesting kind of like photographers experimenting with different things and bringing kind of different ways of looking into the space, which is super interesting. From a visual art perspective, I feel like there's a lot of potential for more photographers and videographers to work in Sri Lanka. I think there's only a few of us and a few more who experiment with photographic visual art, but nowhere near as much as there are sort of like painters or musicians or like sound artists. Well, not maybe not sound artists, but like for example, painters, right? But yeah, for example, but if you go to some place like India, there's like so many sort of like photo based artists who do like photography oriented work. So um, I guess to get back to your question, maybe for me the photograph is just a way of opening a window into something, just expressing a way of seeing, and I feel like um, it is just like one element in how we see the world in general, and I just use it contextually in my work now. I've just like begun to also play around with like screenshots, for example. So one work that I did recently was just a whole bunch of screenshots from hashtags related to beaches in Sri Lanka. So my whole idea was to show how Sri Lanka is represented on Instagram through tourism, the tourism industry. So I took all these like hashtags, took out all the popular posts, and had about 2,000 of these on a wall, right? So you start to see all these trends. You start to see the same picture being taken by 100 different people with the same pose, or like someone holding like king coconuts in front of them, or someone posing in Mirissa in front of the coconut tree hill. And you start realizing that hey, Sri Lanka is kind of like identified through these very specific visuals. Because now travel is, Yasin was talking about this a bit the other day also, right? Travel is so much driven by visual culture. Sometimes I would say a lot of people almost travel because they want to be seen traveling. That's part of the sort of motivation of it. And then visual culture and representation become such a huge part of like travel. And so my goal in this whole process was to see how what makes Sri Lanka sort of visually appealing and what are the kind of visual tropes that Sri Lankans are seen through or Sri Lanka is seen through. So yeah, I play around with images. I'm just very interested in visuals as opposed to photographs as such. And I think every visual has its own merit. And I'm just like interested in sort of like the implications and what that visual says and what it means. You know, I like to break things down, and that's really where my sort of like interest lies. Mm.
You're like a photographer surgeon.
Ah, maybe, maybe I am. Yeah, yeah, maybe like like an analyst possibly. Yeah, that's what I like to maybe think of myself as sometimes. Yeah,
Amazing, amazing.
photographer
Good.
surgeon.
That's
That's a good
awesome.
one.
And,
I
and
might
I
use that.
and I just want to shout out Sharanya, who's on the chat. She's one of the change makers I was talking about. Right?
Oh,
She's
right.
awesome. I had a chat with her as well. Um,
Sharanya
so yeah,
Sekaram.
so
Oh yeah, she's in the audience. Oh, such a honor to be listened to by her. Yeah, we've had quite a
uh,
few conversations about corporates as well in our time. Yeah,
amazing,
yeah,
amazing.
mm.
Halik, brother, I've taken a lot of your time. I
Yeah.
just want to say it's really nice to talk to you, but I also want to say, dude, when I make this a weekly thing, I think we should deep dive into more conversation if you're up to coming and talking again, because I feel like you have a lot of insight to give as well. Because I had a few more questions in mind, but I'm running over time as well. But I just got one more question for you, man. Before you go, what does
Yeah.
kindness mean to you?
Oh, well, yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. It's been like great to break the monotony of isolation, to connect with the outside world a little and to, yeah, hear myself speak a little bit. It's always nice to talk. So thank you very much, man. Appreciate it. And yeah, I would love to come back at some point. That'd be great. Too. What does kindness mean to me? Oof, I feel like that's such a big and broad question and also like a very important question. I feel for me, one thing about kindness is like it's essentially selfless, and I feel like it plays out very deeply in personal relationships, for example, where dynamics can become muddied, for example, with your partner or with a close friend of yours. Uh, you don't really know how to interpret what someone else does, and so automatically you're sort of like inclined to perceive it in a negative way, perceive it as an attack, as opposed to something that might just purely circumstantial, for example. And for me, those are the times when I also think about kindness, and I think this is something that is fresh in my mind, possibly because I've been maybe went through a situation like this recently, and thinking about how if you sort of like overturn that feeling that you have inside you into a more positive feeling, and you don't perceive it as something negative, and can that become like a space for kindness for the people you're dealing with in your life? And I feel like kindness is selflessness in so many different ways. Even if you're just seeing someone in the road and are able to kind of like give something to them or whatever. But I feel like it's mostly also just getting out of your headspace and like not being self-obsessed and obsessed with your thoughts all the time, so you can pay attention to the world around you. And I feel, just on a final note, for mental health, I feel like that's one of the biggest advantages, is that there's so much to explore and so much to see and do if you can just get yourself out of, you know, the funk you can get into sometimes. And I feel like kindness is a result of it, you know.
Sharanya is
Yeah, I feel
apparently
like
saying you were not kind to her.
well, I've been kinder to her than she has been to me. So
But bro, that was a beautiful, beautiful
yeah,
comment. And Sharanya, just to answer your question, when I start my podcast, I will definitely get the three of us together so we can have quite an interesting
great,
conversation, and that would be
fantastic.
awesome.
I
Bro,
might just
Halik,
become sick that day. I don't know what that's gonna play out. Yeah.
oh man, it's been an absolute pleasure, man, having you. Thank you so much for
Likewise.
making the time and coming on.
Thank
I
you,
think the
bro.
people in the audience have been super engaged to what we've been talking about as well. But before you go, man, where can people find you? Any social projects that you're working on that you want us to know? And any final thoughts, man?
Well, no final thoughts. I think you pretty much cleaned me out. I am exhausted now, mentally, so I'm just gonna like go have a tea or something.
Imagine doing this
Anyway,
6 times.
yeah, I know. Yeah. So no, I'm just like followable on Instagram on Kalam Bedouin, and also I'm working with a very interesting group of artists right now, and we call ourselves the Packet, and it's the underscore Packet. I'll just type it out here.
Yeah, sure, man. Is there a Facebook
So
page?
there's an Instagram
I mean,
page.
Instagram page? Yeah,
Yep.
amazing.
And
I'll
we are
shout it out.
working on a few things right now. We are thinking about the virus and the virus crisis and figuring out how to respond to it, or just forming community. And I feel like that's one of the most important things right now is just to like form community, connect with people, go on house party, have house parties, draw stuff together. I mean, it's also nice because people feel like they have the time to do that stuff nowadays. It's like you have nothing to do. You're like your life is on pause. So there's time to do all these things you never have done before. So I feel like we are trying to do that together and maybe also make something in the process. But yeah, that's it. So thank you so much for having me. Looking
Brother, it
forward
was
to
an
your work
absolute
in the
pleasure.
future. Yeah.
But we will definitely play some chess sometime when I come back
Yes,
as well.
let's do it.
I'll show you a thing or two of how to play chess. But other than
Right.
that,
Well, if you can beat Yasin, then I'm not gonna bother playing with you because he's pretty much
is Yasin good?
he's
He's not
good.
really good at anything.
He's better than me at chess. So yeah.
Bro, Halik, thank you so much, brother. Have a
All
beautiful
right.
day ahead. I will definitely
You too.
shout out the page at the end of the day. But
Sounds
yeah,
good.
man. Thank you so much, man.
Bye.
See ya. So, guys, that was Halik. He's one of the OG photographers of Sri Lanka. Yasin, thank you so much for introducing me to him. And please go give him a follow. Check out the packet as well. I've pinned it in the comments so you guys can see that as well. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. That was an amazing conversation. I think that was a great start to the day. But yeah, I'm going to take a quick 9-minute break. I'm just going to get some water, take a piss, and I will be back. Thank you so much for joining. Hope to see you guys in the next one.